Welcome everyone to episode 60 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today I talked with Josh Simons, who is the CEO of Vinyl Group, which encompasses Jackster, Vampr, and Vinyl.com, as well as the Bragg Group, who publishes Rolling Stone Australia, among others. Before he made the move to the business realm, he was also the lead singer of the band Buchanan, who have toured with the likes of Coldplay and Keith Urban, as well as being a songwriter and producer and sharing credits with Travis Scott and Kanye West, among heaps of others. In this episode, we talked about the similarities and differences between being in the business arena as well as the music creation arena, his experiences being such a young entrepreneur, and also what it takes to build really successful business relationships. This is such a great episode with someone who has really lived in so many different areas of the music industry, so stay tuned. If you would like to help the podcast out, you can do us a favor by sharing the podcast around on your social media or in conversation. We would love to spread the word about all of these amazing conversations that I have with such a diverse range of people. To stay up to date with everything What's That Sound, make sure you are subscribed and followed on all of the podcast and social platforms. If you would like to buy a t-shirt, the links are in the show notes. And if you would like to suggest anything like any guests or any topics or anything to do with the podcast or live events, you can send me an email. The link to that is also in the show notes, as well as all of the links to Josh's stuff and my stuff in the show notes. You can get that at any time. Anyway, let's get out of all of this stuff and get right into the episode with Josh Simons. Let's go. You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts. Welcome everyone. My name's Stu Watts and I am here today with Josh Simons. Josh, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thanks, Stu. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, mate. And for anyone that doesn't know about you and who you are and what you do, can you just give us a quick rundown about what you do in the music industry?
Sure. So I'm the CEO of a company called Vinyl Group, a music and media portfolio business. So we own lots of companies that really help people that sort of play in that music creator economy. So we got platforms like Vampr, which is a social professional network for musicians that helps, bass players find drummers, managers find bands, graphic designers find their next project. We own a sort of IMDb for music called Jackster, which is like the world's metadata for music. And then on the media side, we own more recognizable brands like Rolling Stone Australia, which is obviously a music publication where people get their music news. And then we own vinyl.com, which is an e-commerce store, and there's a place for people to buy music. So everything we do is really just about connecting the sort of creator of music with the consumer of music, that being the fan, and hopefully making it a little bit of a fairer music industry along the way.
Oh, I love it. And that obviously speaks to the producers and engineers and artists that might be listening along today. Well, take us back to the early days in your life. Where did music come into the picture?
Yeah, so I guess for me, it was a real family affair. My granddad was a founding partner of a publishing company called Leeds Music in the UK, and that's sort of now today Universal Music Publishing Group. Effectively, it evolved into that. So pretty tall shoulders to stand on. And he sort of passed the torch on to my father, who also went into the world of publishing and worked with people like Paul McCartney and
wow,
Maxi Priest, and it's just a lot of UK music royalty. And so when I came along, I suppose there was a little bit of an expectation that we could do something in the industry. But to be fair, we're obviously starting here in Australia, and that was more of an English heritage. But I suppose you'd say it's in the blood. I also myself as an artist, so straight out of school, actually went into management originally, and I managed a couple of bands, but I really wanted them to make more of a commercial sound, and they weren't, they were a bit too good. And I mean that in a really polite way. Like, they were very credible musicians, but they weren't keen on my pop sort of sensibility.
Yeah.
So I ended up starting my own sort of artist projects, and it did all right. You know, we did pretty good in Australia. We sort of did the Triple J thing, toured the country 7 or 8 times, played some pretty big supports, and charted around the world. And then that sort of ran its course. It sort of went for 5-10 years, and then I moved to the business side of things thereafter.
Yeah. And so, growing up in a family like that, seeing sides of the music industry that, maybe people aren't privy to as a youngster, what do you remember about that?
I remember being like 9 or 10, and do you remember that Tom Jones record, Sex Bomb?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that we were sitting in my granddad's like apartment in somewhere in England, and he was listening to the demo of that on a cassette, and we were listening to that and one other song, and he's like, choose the single. So I remember that.
Wow.
That's like literally one. I remember like that's burned into my memory. There wasn't a lot of moments like that, because the reality is my father passed away when I was like 2. So me, my mum, and my brother, we moved to Australia when we were and I was very young, and we only went back to visit the English side of the family like once every couple of years, and so we'd go back and have these crazy encounters. But it's definitely not a sort of nepotism story. I remember when my band first started getting played on Triple J and things like that, and I think some folks were like, "Oh, it must have been easy because of your family," but the reality is, a dead family in the United. So there was still a lot of having to sort of do it on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, starting your bands and playing music and managing and things like that when you're, still early in your life. What kind of, I guess when you're doing that sort of thing, and you've obviously got a very business and entrepreneurial mindset. So when you're playing in bands, did that look different than the norm? For most people, it's just like jam in people's garage and have fun and things like that. Tell me a bit about about your managerial mindset and things.
We treated it more like a business, which I actually think is a good thing. And most artists get there, especially if they're making money. And that's the objective, right? Is to make money from doing the thing that you love. Not making money, but certainly being able to support yourself, which involves making money. So you got to dance around these topics, but that's the reality of the world we live in. So yeah, we took it more seriously than that. There was the garage jamming stuff, but even then it was to a click track and disciplined, and often with other collaborators in the room watching and recording and reviewing things. Like we were quite analytical about it, which sounds like it takes the fun out of it, but that's we treated it like a job. And honestly, I wouldn't do it any differently. I loved it. I remember one of our first reviews. We did this residency at this place called Northcote Social Club.
Yeah,
and we played there for like 4 weeks in a row, and we did this big production. We brought our own lights. We had a full thing that we built that in the garage. That was literally like my Sparky friends coming up with like a creative production piece. And it's unusual for an indie rock band to have production. And one of the reviews shit canned us. It was like, it's too organized. And it was kind of like, fuck you. Like effort is cool. Like just something different is cool. And that's one of the things that I've always struggled with a little bit with Australia, because sometimes this place does cut you down for trying things that make you stand out.
Yep.
But that's kind of what art is to me. It's doing things, just your own way, the way that feels right to you. I think that's the definition of kind of cool to me. So anyway, we kind of read that and kind of felt like that's a very good representation of how our time with the media always was.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not unusual. Like, yeah, I think Australia, you're right. It's the tall poppy thing is very ingrained in us to make it seem like you have to do things where you're not looking like you're trying and things like that. But the reality of you going to the effort and taking it like it's a business, it actually frees you up in so many ways, because you're eliminating so many stresses. You're also preparing yourself in a way that most bands don't. And it's so important. And like you said, most people learn it, but only after doing it for 10 or 15 years, when a lot of the energy is already spent and you get jaded and this and that.
Right.
So
that's right. Look, I remember, the top of your question, but one of the downsides of being sort of that prepared and understanding the businesses, that knowledge was intimidating to some of the decision makers in the industry, which is not a good thing, because the decision makers you would think should be signing acts that do actually have some literacy in how the music industry works, because the alternative is they sign people who don't understand how it works, and it either ends in court because the artist says it was predatory, or it ends in just ugly disputes and fights, otherwise, because folks just aren't fully aligned. So someone like me comes into the room, and I remember standing on a table in Sony in front of and now passed away and I exec, but and dancing to our songs and stuff, and sort of dictating what terms I wanted. And you had some guys in there who loved that, and then you had other guys that were like, this guy, I think one person's feedback was he knows too much. What kind of excuse is that? So I'm not going to get a record deal, Yeah. So anyway, look, the industry at the end of the day it's a funny one, and but it's people, it's human beings at the end of the day, and human beings are also strange. So
that's true. Yeah.
Our job is really to, again, make things a bit more fair and equitable for artists, whether they have the backing and support of a major or not. And that's the trend. You look at the recorded music industry pie as a whole, of how value is created and distributed, and the portion of that pie that's going to independent artists is just growing year on year. I think it's now above 50% for the first time ever.
Awesome.
I back that. I back that side of the pie.
Yep, absolutely. And when you're doing that sort of thing, did you have any mentors along the way that kind of showed you the ropes, or was it all self-guided and just trusting your gut?
I've got to meet and work with so many incredible people along the way that really helped me in navigate both the major world and the sort of independent world, but just more generally helped me grow as a business person and just as an artist. I mean, my first sizable record deal was with a now defunct record label called Gigantically Small, but the owner of that, Barry Palmer, is the guitar player in Hunters and Collectors. He would go on to be my business partner in many ventures, including Vampr. But him and his network, and Frank Verasso and Tom Harris, who managed the Temper Trap at the beginning of their career, and and just some of the publishers I was signed to, and I won't name every name, some of them are confidential, but I got to work with so many of the biggest people and managers and lawyers and stuff in the world, who were always, when I look back on it, actually just rooting for me to win. And one thing that I probably got wrong, which I think a lot of young people, but probably young men get wrong, is you got so much bravado and so much excitement. You want to conquer the world. So I think in the moment you can sort of want more. And when you look back and you hit a few years on your side, you go, I was very lucky to have people rooting for me at all. You can't take that shit for granted. And I thankfully had many supporters and fans. So very lucky.
That's fantastic. Do you remember moving into, was it a gradual movement from being an artist and producer into the business side of things? Or was it like, okay, this is it for me. I'm changing it up. I'm making a move.
No, it happened over 3 or 4 years. I was very fortunate. My music career, as an artist, the project was called Buchanan. It had started to slow down, although slowing down for us was we were still playing arenas and things, but we were slowing down in that we were doing one release every couple of years, one tour, as opposed to 4 tours a year and multiple singles and stuff. So we were slowing down in one sense, and the business stuff that I was doing, it started with this company, Vampr. I'd started to take on accepting other people's money. You've got a real responsibility to spend it wisely and not waste it, and or not be frivolous and be distracted and have multiple projects. So there was a real moment in time I was playing a gig. I was on stage. I remember the moment where I was like, I can't do both of these anymore. It's not fair to the investors, and it's not really fair on my mental health either to try and run an artist project and be a successful business person. So in the one sense, there was a definitive moment where I made a decision, but because I was making money from music, it allowed me to transition over about 3 years. And that was really good for the business because it meant I didn't have to draw a wage for quite a long time because I could live off of my royalties, leave that money in the company. And not a lot of startup founders actually get that luxury. So I actually, again, I consider myself extremely lucky.
Yeah. And then moving into the business stuff, like there's such a drastic difference between the creative aspect of focusing on music and making all these creative decisions constantly, but as opposed to business where a lot of the things are around conversations and, you know, trying to make sure numbers are right and things like that. There is still obviously a huge creative element to being an entrepreneur and trying new things and things like that. What do you see as the correlations?
I was going to say, like, I fundamentally see them as the same muscle in the brain being exercised. Like when I think about sitting in songwriting rooms with other artists who are trying to crack their single, and I'm sort of, because I did a lot of writing as well as just my artist project, and my job was to sort of like get the structure of the song right or get like that transition from the verse to the chorus working. That's just problem solving, right? It's trying things, it's throwing things against the wall, seeing what sticks, arranging things in an order that makes sense to other people. Business is exactly the same. It's trying things, it's throwing things at the wall, seeing what sticks, getting things in an order that makes sense to other folks. So I actually see the process of particularly writing music and putting together a tour and the logistics side of music very similar to just running a business full stop. And so I find that from a sort of personal satisfaction perspective, in terms of like, you know, getting what you want out of life and ticking that sort of that or quenching that thirst rather in the brain, I get the same satisfaction that I used to get when I was just in the band.
That's great. I love that because there really is. It's like you've got little projects in music. You've got projects, whether that's writing a song or whether that's, you know, planning a tour or whether it's putting an album together or anything like that. And you do get satisfaction each time you successfully realize that goal. And business is like that, where, you know, you're setting something up and when it eventually sees the light of day, because there's so much behind the scenes work in both, when it sees the light of day, it's so exciting and fulfilling. So I love that.
One of the things that, one of the
it.
reasons why I got into music is I actually was in, I dabbled in film for a little while. The problem with film is it takes like 12 months at a minimum to see a project from start to finish, and you don't get those instant satisfaction or sort of instant gratification moments rather along the way. Whereas with music, you know, yes, an album might take 3 years to make, but you're completing songs along the way, you're hitting milestones, you're ticking. And I suppose a film's the same, like you complete a scene, but you don't get to watch it back or get that feedback for quite a long time. Music's a little bit different. You can take your reference files home every night, have a listen, you can work on that tour plan, like you said, and you can sort of tick things off. I took a sabbatical for like a year at the tender age of 18 because I'd burnt out a little bit. I went quite early. And in that year, I went and mowed lawns, but I also tried landscaping. And landscaping, like films, was kind of satisfactory. We're doing big projects, working in beautiful, luxurious houses, but it took a while. Gardening, on the other hand, you'd still work in the nice places, but you'd come in, you'd get it done, you'd see the fruits of your labor, and you'd walk away satisfied. And I had a kind of revelation in that like I am more suited to an industry where you can break up these projects into chunks that in and of themselves are like deliverables that give you some, you know, sense of reward. And I just get that from working in music every day. And so I learned that lesson at a very like young age, and it's kind of stuck with me. I love that sort of compartmentalization and aspect.
I love it. And funnily enough, that's not the first time that gardening's been mentioned on this podcast.
Okay.
But I want to know what allows you to get into the creative zone. Is it, you know, I obviously want to hear your words, but for a lot of people, it's just stepping into the space, or for some people, it's like doing the thing day by day, or being around people. I want to hear what gets you creative.
I don't know, man. I think I'm like just stuck there now. I know that I left. I think I left maybe reality a long time ago. I'm in a constant creative zone. I did this. I was very lucky to be part of Coldplay's tour last November, and we
Unreal.
played like 11 dates in stadiums, and it's the first stadium stuff I've ever as the person on stage playing. And like it had been 8 years since the last time I stepped out on stage, and so it's not exactly a gentle step back into it.
Yeah.
But walking out on the day, right? Like the day before, I'd known about it for a year. We had a year's notice, but we didn't really start rehearsing until about a week before. And then the day before, someone from their camp dropped a pass off to my house. It's like, fuck, this is actually going to happen. And then we arrived at the stadium that morning, and within the first couple of minutes, walking out on stage to do a line check, and it just kind of felt right, and it felt like I never really left the stage. But that's because I never really did. But mentally, I'd been, like coming back to your question, being creative in such an extended period now, and everything that I've done, that I didn't really leave the stage metaphorically, and it did feel just very normal.
That's great. And obviously it takes a lot of collaboration in all of the areas that you've had experience in. What things do you love about collaborating with people, and how is it different when it's being in a band as opposed to, or songwriting with someone as opposed to, in the business side of things?
Being in a band's kind of like being in a marriage. So there's that, you sleep together, you travel together, you share money in a bank account. Business is a little different, it's just in terms of how it's structured, and a little less codependent, and hopefully a lot more healthier than the typical sort of stereotypical band. Collaboration in my mind, I've done a TED talk on this. I'd speak about it, until the cows come home. It's essential. It's not. It's like it's not a nice to have. It's just something that you will do, and so you need to get exceptionally good at it to be successful in a creative field. And that's not because one person can't, because there's plenty of singer-songwriters, for example, and there's plenty of DJs and solo artists, but they're still collaborating, right? They're still collaborating with an art director, they're still collaborating with a manager, they're still collaborating with their publisher, they're still collaborating with the distributor, with the promoter, with the person driving from A to B. Like, collaboration happens on a day-to-day basis. Like, there's really only two things in this world that don't involve collaborating, and it's breathing and masturbating, and the rest of the things that you do almost certainly involve someone else. So you collaborate, like, we're all professional collaborators. And really understanding that, though, gives you a bit of an edge, because it changes how you treat people. And that's, like, for me, the most important thing is you've got to you'll only get as good as you give, so you've got to treat everyone with respect. To the you never know who's going to be your boss as well. And just typically, and more broadly, I've found when you sort of put effort into a new collaboration, whether it's a well-known person or it's someone up and coming or anywhere in between, I've typically found that if you really invest in those relationships, you get something back. You don't always know what you're getting back, but you get something back. It might be an introduction to another person. It might be an unexpected hit. It might be a new revenue stream if we're talking about business, but you generally get a reward for effort. And so I'm constantly putting out to the universe.
Yeah. And I guess on the flip side of that, I guess even mistakes that you've made when it comes to collaborating or working with people, or common errors or deviances from the right way. What are those things that you see happen very regularly, or that you've experienced yourself as, maybe like the wrong way to do things, I guess?
I think being like young and ambitious, I was reading like an interesting article about like the common mistakes that startup founders make. yesterday, and I was reading it. I was like, yeah, that's me. That's me. That's me. That's me. I mean, one, and like the principal one being, you've typically, and we kind of touched on this already, but you'll find that there's mentors around that are actually like really generous with their time and quite giving with advice. And most of the time, as these sort of hot young bucks, like, ready to go, we don't actually listen. Like, we kind of go, yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to do it my own way. I'm going to buck the trend. I'm going to show you how it's really done. And of course, most of the time, you end up learning the same lessons that they learnt before you, but it's kind of a rite of passage. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it actually makes you a better entrepreneur. It makes you a better artist. So there's nothing wrong with sort of trying to be brave and bold and do things a little differently, even if it means you end up coming out the other side doing things actually a little bit more conventionally. Ironically, it isn't. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think, provided that you, again, treat people respectfully along the way, and it's fine if you don't. It just probably means that your opportunities will be cut off
It's true, yeah.
pretty swiftly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the time when you are getting advice, it's not the stuff that you want to hear, and that's you get that feeling in your chest of maybe it's like an anxious feeling or like this difficulty, and that is a natural thing for us to want to divert from that and push against it.
The analogy I heard yesterday was, it's like being told by a city guide of a city you've never been to where the best cafes are, and you're listening and you're like, yeah, I don't even know what the city looks like. So why I care about the best cafe? And so then, you get into the city and then you end up finding the best cafes in your own time. But that's I thought that was a really good analogy, because that's exactly what it is when someone tells you how to go about solving a situation that's new to you.
Yeah. And like you said, the irony of when you finally come back around full circle, when you learn those things that were tough to learn, it sticks with you more, and it kind of allows you to go, it's good that I didn't listen, like you said, because I tried my own thing, I found out, but there is also, merit in the common speak, really. Like, yeah.
We bought Rolling Stone a couple of years ago, and I didn't really understand why they had certain divisions inside of the company. Like, I didn't understand why someone in sales couldn't also do something in strategy, for as an example. It's not actually accurate. I just picking two to
yeah, sure.
And I sort of asked a lot of people around me, like, why can't this be done differently? And there's a few examples of that. But we were quite new to media. Like, we were we've been a music technology company for over a decade, but the media piece is much newer. And massive media fan and consumer, but new to running a media business. And a lot of people around me told me why the way it was remain, and I just couldn't believe it. So I went about disrupting it, and I found out very quickly there was a good reason for it being that way. And then you learn, okay, so media companies actually do operate a little bit differently to a more traditional startup, and so that's okay. And so we'll run them in slightly separate lanes and split up the company. And so what we ended up doing was created vinyl media and then vinyl tech, and that's how the business operates today. I learned that lesson by going in bravely, boldly, trying to change up something that I thought could be better, and then finding out, no, it's probably good the way it is. However, we can actually get a little bit smarter in how we then therefore run the rest of the business. So always learning.
Yeah, for sure. And let's expand on your businesses. I mean, Vinyl, being the CEO of a company that houses many different sub companies. I don't know if that's the right terminology, by the way, but that's how I picture it. And so, they're all focused on music and, trying to help the artist. So tell me, you've already touched about that a little bit, but, let's expand on that.
Sure. I mean, I suppose a lot of companies often, especially during times of like reevaluation or setting strategy for, a new era or whatever, we'll look at, why do we exist? Like, why are we just this company that is all about helping, people in the music industry? And typically, and it's a great sort of thought experiment. When you do this experiment of why does a company exist, you go back and you pull back layers, and every company gets to the same point, which is we want to change the world. So you go, why are we here? And you go, to connect musicians with other musicians. But why? Because the music industry needs collaborations in order to create new music. But why? Well, connection's fundamental to creation. And you go, okay. And so you keep going back. And what happens is layer 5 or 6 is usually why, because the world needs to be a better place. And what you then do is you go back one step, and what you discover there is typically the real reason for why the company exists, and it really helps you then understand the product that you're selling. So all of that is a long-winded way of saying we exist to help connect people. And the reason that we got there and the how and the why almost don't matter, but that's our purpose. Our purpose is connection. So everything that we do is about connecting A to B or to C or D inside of this sort of music creator spectrum. And that spans everything from consumers and fans to rights holders and music creators. And all of our businesses will tick that box in various ways. So that's what they all have in common. The other thing they all have in common is we do make a lot of our revenue through ads, and it is an effective way, particularly in an industry where there's not a lot of disposable income flying around. It is an effective way to monetize at least one or both sides of the audience that are coming to your platforms. And so I broadly view us as an ad company, but one that exists to connect people. And so you could draw parallels with social networks, because that is broadly the model of how social networks make money. I hope that we're a little bit more pure in our intentions and a bit more transparent, and I think we are. I think our track record speaks that. But I hope that answers the question in a roundabout way.
Yeah, it's I love focusing on. I think it's because you've obviously seen so much of the challenges that are in the culture around the music industry and people's not opinions, but how people go about doing things from the grassroots to the stadium shows and things like that. And you've seen so much of I guess the different cultures and how some things are there to help the artist, but some things aren't. And so I feel like that probably gives you a quite broad approach to how you do things.
100%. Yeah. Look, even when we were just Vampr before we had all the other businesses that we've acquired and built, one of the lines that me and Baz used to use to discuss that, describe the business when we were pitching it, or, whether it was to customers, users, or investors, was sort of, from bedrooms to stadiums, or from Abercrombie to Acor, right? It's like got that unique perspective, that domain experience that is unusual. Like there's not probably more than 50 of us in the country that have had that particular experience of playing in the dirtiest of clubs and then playing in the biggest of stadiums and doing it on a global scale and all that kind of stuff. So it is unique, and it does allow you to then apply that to a business, which is what we've done here. And
I love it. How do you the different businesses, your approach to each of them must be slightly different. I want to know a bit more about that, like what you're focusing on when it comes to, each of these different businesses.
Yeah, so every business has its own KPIs, key performance indicators, that we're sort of setting to, I guess, assess performance. You got your laggy ones, but you typically, I'm focused more on leading indicators. And we've got different teams that run each one. So the way I like to sort of structure things is I've got about, 8 or 9 reports at the moment, and they're typically either heads of a skill like product or technology, or heads of the specific brands. We've done our best to try and sort of have, just as I said before, sort of 2 teams that service the respective brands that sit under each of those umbrellas. So you've got broadly the media team and then the technology team. And there's obviously a lot of crossover as well. So I've got my reports from the sort of the tops of those departments. And look, my job's an interesting one. I've got the public facing stuff with the the market, and that involves working with sometimes if you're raising money, say in investment banks, but sometimes it involves talking with brokers and trying to get retail investors to buy the stock and doing quarterly updates and half yearly and annual updates and all those things. So there's that part of the job. But then there's sort of the running of the business. And I find that the role I play there is, and it's probably not a good thing, but we're sort of working on changing this. It's probably more of a firefighter. So, because we do have quite a few subsidiaries, on any given day, there will be issues in various parts of the business. And I often find that, thankfully, because we do have good people, there's usually no more than one or two things going on at any one time that's really pulling me urgently. So I find that I'm pulled into scenarios and situations, and often my job is just to come in with a cool head and try and find a solution. And the thing that's really important to what I do is to identify opportunities and find growth levers. So that's probably the final 30% of what I spend my time on, and that means meeting new folks. It means talking on podcasts with people like yourself. It means keeping my ear to the ground, reading what's going on in the industry, and occasionally, devising hopefully fantastic plans to both create value for the folks that we exist to service, but also as a business to extract for our shareholders. So it's a really interesting job. It's not for everyone. It's there's a lot of people that really probably would fucking hate what I do, but I'm, for whatever reason, the set of experiences that I've had in my life up until now have primed me to be the person to do it at this time.
Yeah. And I mean, that was a huge reason of why I was excited to get you on the podcast, is because you do things that, most of the people that are listening to this would have no idea about, but you've also, been in the world that we live in. And I really would love to know more about, dealing with all the different types of people over the years, because, as a musician and songwriter and producer, and working with musos is such a different landscape to, talking with the people that you mentioned just before. So like, what are the differences and the similarities?
Yeah. I mean, so I'll start with the similarities, because that's just my natural proclivity, is to lean towards what unites us more than what separates us. But people who are aligned get shit done. So what that really means is like on your artist project, or if you're on a song, I'll go back to the songwriting analogy. That's, again, had more experience doing that. When you're in like a writer's room or you're working on someone else's project, like, we're all there in service of the artist and their vision. And if you're not, then you won't last very long in that world. But let's pretend that everyone in there is decent enough at their job that they understand the mission statement. So we're all in the room because Trey Capital has a new album coming out and we want to make it sound as Trey as possible. And so our job is to apply our expertise at what we do. So in my case, might be tweaking a synthesizer sound or writing a lyric. But we're doing that in service of the vision of the person. And so our job is to get aligned around that vision. And alignment is what produces an album that goes on to be successful. Business is the same. So if you're aligned with your board, if your executive team is aligned with the CEO, what will typically happen is that then everyone underneath them will also get in alignment. And so it sort of flows through. And even if we just talk about being in a band, if you're not in alignment, and this is why most bands fail, including my own band, which had a better run than the average band, it's still, I would consider it a failure. You didn't have alignment. And alignment really just occurs in a band when every member has the same goal. There's a reason why bands like Coldplay and U2 become as big as they did, and why it doesn't happen very often. And it's because every one of them wanted to be successful, wanted to treat it as a full-time job, and put it above and before anything else. And that means that for relationships, before school or education, it's got to be number one. And that is almost like anyone who's like, oh, how do I make it? That's the hack. That's it. Work with people who have the same goal and who want it to work, and you will make it work. It will happen by sheer force of will. It will happen.
I love it.
But it's fucking hard to find people who are aligned, because you've got family that, you got a family member that's sick. You got someone whose partner needs some money for something, all these different life forces. Someone's dropped out of school and might be a fuck up, and someone's in jail and needs bailing out.
Yeah.
All of these life things happen, and some of them you can control, but most you can't. And that's what prevents alignment from happening. So again, success is sort of bred by where everyone on that team goes, within reason, I don't care what life throws at me, I'm still prioritizing this as number one. And if you can do that and find people that think like that, you don't even necessarily have to love each other, but you have to be able to see each other, obviously. But if everyone's singularly focused on sort of that achieve whatever that goal is, and that goal doesn't need to be the number one artist. It could be crack the top 40. It could be tour the world. The goal is irrelevant. What I'm saying is you'll achieve your goal if everyone wants it. It's actually that simple.
And communication is such a big part of that. Like pretty much like half of the words that you were saying then was around how you communicate with people and getting on the same page and things like that. So, talk to me about like what communication, like what focus you have on communicating effectively, and how has that expanded over the years as well?
I've sort of always been honest, or probably to a fault, because honesty doesn't always get you. It can get you in trouble, particularly with romantic relationships. But no, being honest, traditionally does take you a very long way, and especially when you learn how to. I mean, I'm sort of poking fun at myself a little bit here. Obviously, I know how to spin things as part of the job. I know how to wait for information to be deployed because it's more helpful structuring the way in which information is delivered. So there's an art to communication. And I don't think you ever stop learning there, right? Like that's some of the best communicators I know are some of the oldest people I know, because it's just a skill you refine as you go through life.
Yeah.
But I do think as a broad rule, honesty and enthusiasm is a charming combination. And it will annoy people at times because it's very hard. Like when someone's honest, it's like you cannot like what you're hearing, but if they're telling you the truth, it's like, oh, fuck. And so, enthusiasm, smiling, telling the truth, they're actually really simple strategies to usually advance whatever it is you're trying to advance. And that's been probably one of the secrets behind what I've done.
Yeah, I love it. And what it really kind of shines to me how relevant that is for people like producers and managers, because we're working with people, we're trying to pump them up, we're trying to get them to do things and trying to get things out of them, and how much of that life led into what you do currently.
Well, I had a healthy contempt for managers in particular, because managers of successful artists are like bouncers at a nightclub. And I get it, because management's a really unfulfilling. It's a really tough job, and it often doesn't pay as well as it should. There's a really hard job, and there's not enough good managers, but good managers are like the coolest people in the world, and also deserve to be paid the most.
Yeah.
But they're far and few between. But what I hated in my career, these sort of bouncer type gatekeeper managers, and I also had empathy for them, because I knew that when you're managing a successful act, you do have to kind of filter who gets access or not. But when you're dealing with other people in the industry, there's nothing stopping you from still having a bit of extending respect and just general decency. And going back to some of the bigger acts I've ever worked with, their managers are nice, they're good people, they're open doors, especially when they know that you're not just a kid with a dream, but an active participant in the industry. But and so isn't it funny that the most successful ones are the nice guys? But then what really frustrated me was when Buchanan was having some success, so you wouldn't, we were sort of mid-tier. That's almost when you discovered the nastiest, filthiest people in the industry, and I hated it. So that's one of the reasons I Vampr was I was like, let's cut out some of the middle people. You don't need them at the earliest stage in your career. You certainly need them at other stages. But if their function is to connect you from A to B, business managers are different, obviously, but like just day-to-day managers, if we can create tools that allow people to do that for themselves, my hypothesis was that the industry might be slightly better for it, because there are a lot of nasty grifters in that tier.
And this podcast is focused towards primarily people that are starting out as producers and engineers. I also like to try and give perspective to those who want to listen that have been doing it for a while. But I think what if we focus on those early years as a producer engineer, the business side is so important. What advice do you have for people that are listening that they're hearing these words that you're talking about and they're maybe not quite understanding? What sort of steps can they put in place to try and improve those skills?
Yeah, and it is hard for producers to sort of get their business right, to use slang, straight out the gate, because you kind of have to be producing a certain volume of work and turning over a certain amount of or making a certain amount from royalties before you'll capture the attention of a serious manager who might be able to open doors. But I think the key thing for early stage producers is get your producer agreement sorted straight out the gate, like before you start working on the production. Are you there? Sorry, I
Yeah.
think the line
Yep.
just got a
Yep.
bit crap. You there?
Yep.
Cool. Getting sort of producer agreements sorted, agreeing on splits. As a producer, I always pretty much demanded that I got points on both the recording and the songwriting, and the publishing. So I think that's a really important thing. And then obviously it's kind of, I always feel like it is the responsibility of whether it's the artist or a producer to make sure your presence, on the PRO registration services is accurate and up to date. And that's going to be the number one way that you get, paid on the back end. So making sure that's, going, and then really beyond that, there's certain things. Australia actually does it better than most other countries. Like we have a thing called Song Hubs here, which is a great like camp organized by APRA that happens multiple times a year. I've made some of the best, most important connections of my life on the back end of participating in those. I've done 3 or 4 of them.
Unreal.
So doing things like that can be absolutely life-changing. It certainly was for me. And it just, well, it again reinforces the really important need to collaborate frequently, but with a diverse group of people. That's why camps are amazing. They put you with folks that you like. I would never have ordinarily worked with country songwriters, but camps put you in a room with a country songwriter and you're like, hell yeah, let's go. And so I'd encourage things like that, especially in the early days when you're still just building a network. I think like business managers and lawyers and things like that, in my experience, they typically kind of emerge at the right time. You'll know the right time because you'll be busy. You'll be looking at your calendar and you go, shit, I've got 4 or 5 sessions this week. And then, at that point, if you're working that frequently, you'll know enough people that you'll start to ask, who does your sort of taxes? Because taxes for people in creative fields is like, a little bit more complicated than just a person who's working at Coles, for example. There's a bit more to it. So, you'll just start asking questions of the people that you work with, like, who do you use for this and who do you use for that? And the reality is like, there's not actually that many that are good. So you'll end up working with the same, folks that everyone else does.
I love it. And, the future is bright. There's lots going on. The music industry is a fascinating one because it combines new technologies with things that have been around for 70, 80 years more. What continues to excite you about the near future in the music industry?
Well, like music and technology have been like codependent, secret affair for years, ever. Music doesn't exist without technology. So I always find every new development in tech and then its subsequent impact on music, which usually is felt a few years later. I find it to be fascinating. Every time it's happened, there's been tremendous opportunity, both for entrepreneurial types, but also for artists to find new. Artists get new ways to break. Entrepreneurs find new ways to make money, and the industry as a whole, with the exception of when the piracy thing came in around the 2000s, but the exception of that development, almost every advancement technologically has been a positive thing for the music industry in the long run. Maybe not immediately, but certainly in the long run. And so I get so excited every time I hear about something new that's come along. Initially, your heart sinks a bit. Yeah, another fucking platform I've got to work with as a business person. You go, another trend I've got to keep up with.
Yeah.
So there is that initial kind of ugh. Yeah. But I think once you get past that, then you go, okay, there's an opportunity here to actually be a trailblazer. And being a trailblazer is, how you sort of can potentially cut through and secure your future as an individual. So, look, I love it. It's easy to sort of, like, I think you said a word earlier, cynical. I think you can get cynical and jaded working in music, and you can. I'm as guilty as everyone, having moments where I go, why do I work in this fucking industry? But there's more moments of the complete opposite of that. And that's what makes it worthwhile, and that's why we do what we do.
I know, damn humans with our brains being wired to look at the negative stuff first.
I know. Craziness.
And for you specifically, the things that you're currently working on, I mean, just the stuff obviously that you can talk about, what are you looking forward to in the next 6, 12, 2 years, 6 to 12 months, 2 years sort of thing?
Wow, yeah. That's a big...
Well, okay, let's just keep it to 6 months then.
Sure. Look, we're doing a lot of really interesting stuff with generative AI. Not so much on the music Gen AI side. That's that space is a bit scary still. There's a lot to be worked out in terms of who owns what and who needs to get credited. So less on that side, but we're doing a lot with generative AI on the media side of our business. And we'll have more to say on that in a couple of months. But what we've been testing and playing with behind the scenes and getting ready to roll out more broadly really could change the way that music journalism is done moving forward, and the speed at which we can respond to breaking news around the world, how we can deliver that content from news source to fan is extremely exciting. Probably sounds a little bit nerdy, but the reality is, like, everyone on the internet reads about things that they give a shit about, and how that content is produced and how it's delivered to the masses. I get to work in that really important sort of middle piece there, but that connects those dots. So we're working on that obsessively at the moment, and it's really exciting.
Love that. Well, we'll start to wrap it up. The last question I like to ask my guests is, for the people that are in their early stages, or if you could talk to yourself in the early stages of specifically being a producer, and then secondly, for any artists that might be listening, what are the best quick bits of advice that you could give those? So first of all, producers, and then secondly, artists.
I wish I didn't smoke cigarettes, because I was, especially in LA, because I was like the smelliest guy in the studio. And like when I worked at Good Music, Kanye's old label, and his studios for, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years there. And I was like the only guy there that still smoked cigs. And you'd come in, and when you're the smoker, you don't smell it. But when you stop smoking, you realize how bad it was in hindsight. And I had friends in there that were like, you can't do that. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, you can. But no, I wish I didn't. I think that was probably a turn off for a few people, and probably blunted a few opportunities, honestly. So that's my advice to producers: don't smoke cigarettes. And on the artist side, I don't know. I think we kind of covered it. I think just
Yeah.
find people that you can align with, find people that want to achieve the same end goal that you do, and try and enjoy it. And also remember that nothing really matters.
Well, Josh, thanks so much, man. This has been awesome. I've loved this conversation because, yeah, like I said earlier, you've lived through so many different areas of the music industry, and I think it gives such an interesting perspective to, the listeners here. And so I really appreciate it. So thank you once again for joining us.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Stu.
You're welcome. And to the listener and viewer, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. Much appreciated. Spread the word about it. We would love to get these conversations out to as many people as we can. And yes, we will see you next time on What's That Sound podcast. Thanks for listening to What's That Sound. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.